Hear me okay? Welcome home. Yesterday was, I got choked up yesterday. I was thinking about just seeing you guys, and I remember so many years we'd come back and just kids would be angry being here, and staff would be angry, but yesterday felt like home to me. And we missed you kids, I know we did. We talked about you a lot. Even the ones that we never thought we would have missed, we missed the most, I think, sometimes. But it's good to be in the Lord's house. It's been great being around the community, getting to go to church in other places, hear some great speakers, hear great music, join in fellowship with other bodies of the Lord, and all those things are good, but you always feel like, just miss home, and this is home. And I know we're down in number a little this year. We lost a big senior class, and I see so many empty seats. I just want to get everybody in if I could. But you guys know what camp is? You ever heard of the word purpling at camp? Raise your hand if you ever heard of purpling. That purpling is bad at camp. Okay, purpling is where, you know, the traditional color for boys is blue, and the traditional color for girls is red or pink. But when you put them together, what do you get? You get purple. And at camp, they'll say, no purpling. That means stay away. You know, let's separate. It's for our own good. This is, I think at Mount Mission, sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when we're in class with each other, we go to the hall together, we're around the same people almost all the time. And then I know, especially for guys, like when you're with your boys, you have your way of doing things, right? And sometimes just spreading out among our families is a beautiful thing. The one thing I love about the summer is there's so many people, especially staff, that I never see during the school year. You'll maybe see them at the counter, like a Miss Whitaker. I'm like, how are you? And we have about 10 seconds to talk. And then we go back into our own separate worlds. But I want to encourage you guys, you know, purpling is okay in church if it's done appropriately. We want to integrate. We want you guys to feel like we're a body. And don't get into the same rut of what you always do outside this building. Because although we worship God in every breath we take, every moment of every day, this is a place that's set apart. And this place is holy and sanctified. And when we're here, this is our goal, our first fruits. And today we're going to talk about what first fruits are and how it applies to us today. Because this is an Old Testament term, right? How many of you guys, when I say the word first fruits, you immediately think of Old Testament? I probably do. But I've conditioned myself to see it differently. But before we begin, I want to use my first fruits to go to the Lord and pray together. So if you guys just join me, and that doesn't just mean closing your eyes. That means that's giving God our hearts right now as we look to Him. Oh, Father, we look back and we just see how much you are part of every aspect of our blessing. Every aspect of the goodness surrounding us comes from you. And Lord, today you are good, and Lord, I'd be lying if I wasn't nauseous right now. But I feel there's just some beautiful things you want to say to your family here, Lord. So Lord, speak loudly. Speak to each and every one of us individually, and speak to us collectively as one church body. And Lord, let it be beautiful because it comes only from you. So Lord, whatever is on your heart for your children, Lord, place on our hearts. In your beautiful name we pray. I do want to start with a chapter. And here's where I'm nervous. I'm going to say the chapter, and some of you are immediately going to go, because it's in Deuteronomy. Has anyone in the room ever, be honest, been passionate about Deuteronomy? Like, oh yes, we're in Deuteronomy today. No, we probably don't. There are people here who are. Today I can finally say, yes, I'm passionate about Deuteronomy. And I can only say that because last week I was preparing for the sermon, and God opened this up, and man, did he just open his mouth and pour out goodness all over me. I made connections I'd never seen before. It's like floodgates opened, and it was like, God is just blessing and blessing. And I'm thinking, this is Deuteronomy. How am I shaking in Deuteronomy? You know, it's not one of those chapters you put on your refrigerator, but it's beautiful. And we're going to talk about first fruits, and I'm going to be using the New Living Translation. I love it because it's living. This is a living Bible, and it's the way we talk today. So forgive me if that's not your preferred one, but that's the one I like, and I'm preaching. All right, so we're in chapter 26. So I'm going to read through this and kind of break it down in a couple verses at a time. When you enter the land your Lord, your God, is giving you as a special possession, and you have conquered it and settled there, put some of the first produce on each crop you harvest into a basket and bring it to the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for his name to be honored. Go to the priest in charge at this time and say to him, with this gift I acknowledge to the Lord your God that I have entered the land he swore to his ancestors he would give us. The priest will then take the basket from your hand and set it before the altar of the Lord your God. The first thing and by the way, I didn't stumble on this because I was doing a devotional in Deuteronomy. I was actually researching where in the Bible it refers to first fruits. Because I knew from the start when we talked about where we were going with the preaching this year, like, let's start it off right. Let's start it off with our best. Our first fruit. Let's define what this word first fruits is. First fruits was referred to, I don't know, many of you may have different points of origin in the Bible where you've heard the word. But it's where the Israelites would give their best. Their firstborn son would be dedicated to God, or the best of their products, whether it was livestock or grain or produce, anything that they were doing with their hands, anything that their life was built around, they would bring to the Lord, and they would put it on an altar. And on this altar, an altar, those of you who don't know, most of you probably do from the Bible classes, was a bunch of stones that were uncut, which we're going to come back to, which is pretty cool. But these uncut stones that were used as a place, the Lord would usually tell them, I want you to build an altar here. And on this place, they would bring their offering. And their offering was the Old Testament's way of making penance, of making things right. Now, we come from a New Testament church, and the Old Testament is still a part of that, but it's different. We have Christ now, whereas Christ was not a part of this equation. They had an altar where at designated times, there were different periods, sometimes right after the event, so I think like every 3 years for other types of sacrifices, some annually. They would bring their best and they would give it to the Lord, and then everything would be clean again. Then they would pretty much go and live life the way they lived again. But this altar was used to give first fruits. Now, how many of you, if I say first fruits, thinks about Cain and Abel? Anyone think of Cain and Abel? We're going to come back to them in a little bit. But I wanted to talk about this idea of first fruits before we actually get into it. When I read the beginning, and this is the part, I'm okay with some participation. If someone wants to shout out to me, is there something that jumped out at you in regards to life here at Mount Mission School in the first couple verses? I'm seeing this promised land, guys. I don't know about you, but I miss home. I want a home. I'm excited. I'm blessed to have a place to lay my head. A place that's comfortable, where my kid can have a cat. There are some great things, and the Lord has provided, but I miss home. I miss a place that my wife and I were talking, my parents are gone this weekend. And we went to bed last night, she said, it's nice that we don't have to clean up right now. When you're in someone else's space, you have to clean up after yourself all the time because it's their space. To be home is something I'm looking forward to. I'm really excited about. And he's talking about the promised land. When you get there, when you arrive to that promised land, and there's so many promised lands, guys. Every bit of goodness on this earth that God gives us is the promised land. It's all just fruit of his goodness. So whether it's a home, whether it's that breakthrough you're praying your whole life for, whether it's
something major happening in your family, great news. These are all different types of promised lands that's there. But I want to look at verse 4. What do we do with our offering? The priest will then take the basket from your hand and set it before the altar of the Lord your God. You know what the New Testament says about this priest? Who is this priest? This is Jesus. And we're taking an Old Testament scripture, and we're not changing it, but it's becoming something greater. And what's greater is Christ. Christ is now this priest. Christ is this priest who takes our offering, who takes what we can give, which is not much, and he makes something beautiful out of it, and so that it can be pleasing. So the priest takes the basket. Picking up in verse 5. You must then say to the presence of the Lord your God, my ancestor Jacob was a wandering Aramean who went to live as a foreigner in Egypt. His family arrived, few in number, but in Egypt they became a large and mighty nation. When the Egyptians oppressed and humiliated us by making us their slaves, we cried out to the Lord, the God of our ancestors. He heard our cries and saw our hardship, toil, and oppression. So the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand and powerful arm, an overwhelming terror, and with miraculous signs and wonders. I'm going to pause here. This section kind of talks about where we've been. It talks about those struggles. Now, for them in this time, it was living in actual slavery. Now, I dare say none of us have lived in actual slavery. Some of us maybe felt that way when we're punished to our room, or there's a place we don't want to be, and people have rules that we don't like. This isn't slavery. But this is their problem. Now, I don't know what it is for you, but there are trials maybe in your past, maybe still in your present, and definitely still going to be some in your future. But this is the build-up. You know how a lot of the worship we sing will have that verse toward the end? Great example, the one we just sang. They start out like this, the last verse, and this is a very common thing. Then came the morning that sealed the promise, your buried body. And then it changes, right? It began to breathe. I love that line. How many of you guys know that song we just did? I know a lot of you did it at camp this summer. But have you ever thought about that image? Jesus laying in the grave, and then suddenly you just see the shroud rising and breath actually coming out of his mouth. That's such a powerful image for me. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. But that's what it was like. His body became alive again. But they have this buildup. And as with most good songs, as with most good stories, what happens in a story? You have to have something bad happen, right? Mr. Beery's talking about series of unfortunate events. How many of you read that? What do? They dangle the carrot in front of you, right? Like, oh, it's about to get good. They're about to get their happy ending. And then what does he always do? Pulls it away. He's like, oh, this is not the kind of story for you. This is going to be a bad story. And then he dangles the carrot to give you a little bit of hope and takes it away again. A little bit of hope and takes it away. That's what a good story is built on. It's built on a culmination of events that happen, and then something tragic happens. And what do they have to do to overcome this tragedy? That's the story of this book. That's the story of sin entering the world and building and building and building until suddenly we don't see a hope, and then a God of hope comes and delivers. So what we're seeing in those verses are simply just this culmination of bad things. Now, right in your life, let's examine. Is there a culmination of things that we would deem to be bad, that we would deem to be harmful? We might even say, oh, they're keeping me away from following God. Or maybe we're blaming God, like Mr. Beer was talking about. We think that things are happening to us because of God allowing them to, or whatnot. But then, as in with all happy endings, there is hope. And we pick up in verse 9. He brought us to this place and gave us this land flowing with milk and honey. Milk and honey. I know some of you may not like to drink milk. I know my boys definitely do. Parker, Violet, plow their milks. Maybe it's not milk or honey for you, but you understand the reference. It's a place that is full of plenty, of sustenance, a place that is sweet and nourishing and full of life. We have a happy ending. And now, O Lord, I have brought you the first portion of the harvest you have given me from the ground. Then place the produce before the Lord your God and bow to the ground and worship before him. Afterward you may go and celebrate because of all the good things the Lord your God has given to you in your household. Remember to include the Levites and the foreigners living among you in the celebration. And then it gets into some more detail, but I want to focus on that part right now. Some of my favorite psalms all have the same kind of theme, and it refers to a sacrifice. You guys know what a sacrifice is? In the Old Testament, it was when they put something up here on the altar. But a sacrifice, how that word has kind of changed for us today, is simply something that we're giving over to God. Something that you want to hold on to, like it belongs to you. But saying, I'm going to lay it down because God is sovereign. And I want to exalt him above whatever I desire. So we have ample opportunity. And today is going to kind of serve as two purposes. I think there's great word in this, but there's also some good instruction. And this is where church is going to get a little different. Because what you guys get used to when you're here in church are, for instance, how many of you came and sat down in the same place you sat last year? Just, I mean, you don't have to say. I know some of you moved halls and you're excited to be in a new section. Yes. But for a lot of you, you kind of just fall back into your normal routine. Maybe that's okay, but maybe it's not. How many of you immediately fell into norms that you were in last year? Not just in this building, but already at Mount Mission. I want you to think about certain things. I know you have friends that are closer to you, and I understand that the people you connect with the most, you want to be around them the most. But guess what? God has something in store for you this year. There's in this room someone you're going to become incredibly close to that you weren't before. There's goodness ahead, and it's going to be different. It's going to look different. But right now, I want to kind of take an opportunity to talk about as a MMS staff member. I want to talk about some ways we look at this church time together. Because this is the first week together, and instead of listing a bunch of rules and stuff, there's no rules. It all goes back to this. It goes back to first fruits. And I want to show how first fruits are integrated in everything that we do here. First fruits show a heart behind it. First fruit is not about who has something better. Because I guarantee if I said, put all the money you have in here, that's your first fruits. And some of you are going to have more than others. And those people, that's not considered first fruits. You look at their heart and you say, who is giving out of the greatest desire to hold on to that, or the greatest need to trump that desire because you love God more? That's first fruits, is giving the best that you have to offer. And there's ways that I want to talk about that today. I say the word church, I guarantee, especially you younger ones, you probably think church is the building or where you go on Sunday morning. That is not what church is. Church are you guys. Church is me and you and all of us together. Church is God's people, God's kids, all coming together. And it's all centered around this. Now, this is just man's way of showing communion. I guarantee in the Last Supper when they had this, they did not have this shiny gold little platter. Everyone did not have evenly distributed grape juice. And they definitely did not have these. I don't even know how you would make these. I touched it, so I don't want to eat it now and offend people. When I was little once, confession, since I'm in church, my parents used to do the youth group, and I remember they would just drag me along, and I would be it was down in that old chapel, and I remember hanging out, and there was old communion sitting there, and it was probably like his age. I just remember picking out an old communion I could eat. My God was in my stomach, still is. But this church body is not just a place. It's not just a list of things we have to do. This is what we get to be. Church is not what we have to do, but what we get to be. And I want us to change that mindset. It's that feeling that I felt outside yesterday when car after car would pull up, van or bus would pull up, and family would walk up. That's what I get to be. I get to be a part of that family. I get a church like that. But church is not something where we just take. And that's what I really want to break through with you kids, is we don't come here and we judge everything on whether it's good enough for us. Some people, and please wake him up. Wake him up. We'll talk about the sleeping a little bit. Right now, just try to give me your attention, okay? Just, that's out of respect, okay? Sorry, where was I? Okay. What we get to be are people that put into one another. All through the New Testament, there's instructions on how we can better serve the church. We don't come here and sit down and say, oh, I don't like the way communion is done now, so I'm not going to go down there. I'm tired today. Why can't they bring communion to me? Because in my church, they bring communion to me. Or why can't it be the kind of bread I like? Or I don't like grape juice. Again, it's about what I'm getting at of things, how we view things. When the music is playing, I know I'm guilty too. I'll be at a place and they'll start a song and I'll think, I don't like this song. I'm really annoyed. I've heard this song 1,000 times. I don't really want to sing it anymore. And every single time I utter those words, the Holy Spirit just touches me and says, then maybe you need to sing it again. Maybe you need to find what the song is saying of how you glorify me. And you put glorifying me above your tastes. So it is not about us coming into this room and being satisfied, being entertained. It's just boring. I don't like sitting still that long. Or we make excuses and say it's part of our anatomy. Oh, I have a condition. I just can't sit still too long. I space out. And we make excuses for all the things that we're not willing to give over to the Lord. But we need to understand church is not about pouring in, but it's about pouring out. I had a talk with Miss Carter, I think about 2-3 years ago, and she had this metaphor that I loved. And I've never forgotten, but living streams, living bodies of water comes into it like a pool, and it doesn't just sit there. It's alive if the water continues to flow. It spreads to other areas.